Good morning and welcome to Rising. I'm joined by Emily Jashinsky and Kim Iversen this Monday morning. Emily, what's on deck?
Well, two Intercept reporters will detail new findings related to U.S.-funded coronavirus research in China. And Philip Wegman is with us to weigh in on Joe Biden's executive orders to mandate vaccines for larger private businesses.
But first, the FBI released a heavily redacted 16-page report from April of 2016 related to its investigation regarding the role that the Saudi Arabian government played in supporting hijackers who carried out September 11th terrorist attacks. The 2016 report shines light on the probe of Omar al-Bayoumi, who was thought to be a Saudi student in California, but has been suspected of providing logistical support to two of the hijackers. And the documents were released 10 days after President Biden's executive order to make some files public ahead of the 20-year anniversary of the attack. So these documents are really interesting because what was previously thought was this al-Bayoumi had said that he just happened to run into some of the hijackers by chance in a restaurant. And these documents show that actually, according to some eyewitnesses, there was just no way. He approached from quite a distance, went up to these guys. And then now it's looking like he was even an operative for the Saudi government. So this sheds some light and raises more questions as to the role of the Saudi government in the attacks on September 11th.
Isn't that the big question, is how linked were they to the Saudi government formally? And in Bayoumi's case, it was always, I think, completely lacking in credibility that he just sort of bumped into the hijackers on accident in San Diego. It never actually really seemed to be credible in one way at all. But then the question remains, how linked to the Saudi government formally was he? Do these documents, do you think, Ryan, give us any more evidence towards that?
I think so, in the sense that you have Prince Bandar's, deputy working directly with these two people in San Diego who were then working with the hijackers. So and one of them was an employee of the consulate of Saudi Arabia.
Right.
So that's a pretty direct link. You also have one of the Saudi royalty princesses funneling money to Bayoumi that winds up that the FBI believes winds up with the hijackers, and that's before you get to all the different charities that are funding like other elements of this operation. But it does seem like a pretty close link, like actual employees of the consulate, actively assisting the hijackers. Kim, my favorite part was always that Donald Trump was one of the few that was willing to just straight up say, the Saudis, they helped with 9/11. And then he made his first trip, his first foreign trip as president, to Riyadh, and built an incredibly close relationship with Saudi Arabia. That is kind of American foreign policy just boiled down to its essence. Just stripped of all of its pretense. But they did it, but they've got the oil and they're going to buy our weapons. So that's fine. What do you think if they take away some of that kind of rawness to it? What does this report do for Saudi relations? Like, how do we continue to have a normal relationship with a country that helped in 9/11?
Right. It's a good question, but I feel like all of us have suspected for a really long time that the Saudi government was more behind it than all of these others. We've gone in and we've marched into the Middle East. We've practically destroyed the entire region except for Saudi Arabia. In fact, we've helped them destroy Yemen, right, on top of it. So I don't know if this is really going to change anything. We have a deep financial relationship with Saudi Arabia, and I think this really does call into question what their motivation was to facilitate this. If they were found, I think a lot of us suspect, to be really more behind these attacks than any of these other countries that we've destroyed. But I doubt that really anything's going to happen, or that they will be taken into account unless we sever our relationship with them somehow, like our financial, as we probably move towards being less dependent on oil potentially, then maybe in the future, right, we'll see, 20 more years from now, finally we'll say, the Saudis did it.
Well, and just to sort of underline that point, these documents are really heavily redacted. And all of this, by the way, I think also completely emphasizes the degree of the intelligence failure leading up to 9/11. If these people were working for the Saudi government and making contact with people who the FBI should have had on its radar and didn't, and we know that at the time, it sheds light on the degree of the intelligence failure. And then going forward, I don't see, and this also goes to your point about Donald Trump saying, just stripping away the pretext here, like the Saudis did it. Oh, well. And so the possibility, the possibility of anything changing, I think, seems so limited. I actually can't see in any context, in any diplomatic context, how the Biden administration would broach this in a serious way in terms of like actually negotiating with the Saudi government. I just don't see that happening at all.
So over the weekend, former President George W. Bush appeared on CNN to mark the anniversary of the attacks. During the appearance, he took shots at violent extremists at home. Let's watch that.
And we have seen growing evidence that the dangers to our country can come not only across borders, but from violence that gathers within. There is little cultural overlap between violent extremists abroad and violent extremists at home. But in their disdain for pluralism, in their disregard for human life, in their determination to defile national symbols, they are children of the same foul spirit, and it is our continuing duty to confront them.
That is absolutely repulsive. That makes me so angry, and not because there's any reason to, champion or celebrate January 6th rioters who did something completely disgusting. But that comparison, first of all, is being used as a piece of support for them to now perpetuate this domestic war on extremism, or this war on domestic extremism, which means expanding the surveillance state and continuing to eat away at our freedoms. But it's also just, I was actually on the National Mall on Saturday on 9/11 with an organization, Young America's Foundation, that was putting flags out for each person lost on 9/11. And so we were on the mall looking straight to the Capitol. And one of the last times I had a view straight from the Capitol is when I was covering the January 6th riots. And I was out there before I had heard that anyone was making these comparisons, looking straight on at the Capitol, where I had seen, this horde of people just go crazy on the Capitol building. And one scene that was so disgusting to me that I had to leave after a certain period of time. And then getting home and hearing these comparisons, I couldn't believe it. I really, I could not believe how disgusting and how, how much contempt you have to have for a certain, part of this country to make that comparison. It's so outrageous. And yet it's being repeated.
Right. I mean, last time I checked, I haven't seen any Americans strapping bombs to children and sending them into buildings to blow people up. I mean, to make that comparison is very radical, and it is just fueling this. We're shifting, right? We're shifting this war on terror from the Middle East to domestic. And you're right, Emily, we're pointing the finger at the Trump supporters from the January 6th and also anti-vaxxers. I mean, I think both groups are being demonized as, well, they're causing harm to our country. We have to surveil them. We have to limit them. We have to wage war on them in one way or other. And when you perpetuate that, you just add to this new shift of where they're going to be putting all of those efforts that they put to the Middle East. They're going to be putting it here domestically.
Well, Timothy McVeigh, when he blew up the federal building in Oklahoma City, did take out a child care center. It killed more than 100 people. So it's not as if there's never any violence on the on the extreme fringe there. But I don't.
That's not what he's talking about. He's very specifically talking about January 6th.
He's not talking about Timothy McVeigh. If he were, that'd be a different question. I think you're right about.
I'd be fine with that.
Question of how it's. How if Bush sees, equates the threats, that then he wants to equate the response, which is to bring a war on terror back home, which is how these things happen, and it is one of the reasons some people opposed it in the first place. Some people opposed it just on its own general terms. Others said, look, if this doesn't end outside of the country. This is always going to come back. But the other question is, who does George Bush think he is?
Yeah.
He's done more damage to the world and to the United States probably than any president ever
right.
in the history of our country. Like the place that the world could be in had Bush never been president is like too depressing to even contemplate.
Do you know who retweeted a January 6th, 9/11 comparison? Michael Hayden. I mean, this is 100%. This is their pretense for the domestic war, the war on domestic extremism, expanding the surveillance state, and you have to make this equivalence, which is a false equivalence. Both things can be bad, with one of them being much, much worse. But when you sort of conflate them casually, it does make it a whole lot easier to justify your domestic surveillance. Now, on that note, the editor-in-chief of the Chinese Communist Party tabloid, The Global Times, predicted that there will be another deadly attack in the United States, saying, quote, the September 11th attack was suicide attacks by 19 terrorists, but it was not the suicide attack of terrorism. Terrorism will accumulate power to launch the next deadly attack. Time will prove that it is a mistake for the U.S. to regard China as its biggest adversary. I feel like I need some mouthwash after reading those words. Meanwhile, a Chinese foreign ministry spokesperson on Friday said that America's 20-year war in Afghanistan, which shares a land border with China, only led to the proliferation of terrorist organizations and fighters in the region. Kim, what's your reaction to that?
I mean, look, China is definitely our biggest competitor for sure, going on into the world stage and building with economics and everything that we're kind of as we move forward with China. But to say that, and I do think they have somewhat of a point, I suppose, saying that, hey, we're not the terrorists, it's over there, look over there. But we shouldn't be looking over there either. I mean, we don't need to be looking for terrorists anywhere, quite frankly. We need to be economically competing with China, and that's it. But there is the rhetoric building against China of terrorism.
And predicting that there's going to be another terrorist attack is one of the easiest predictions to make out there, because
it's like a horoscope.
Yeah, it's like, because if it doesn't happen, nobody's going to really remember. Well, you said there was going to be a terrorist attack. Well, yeah, I didn't say exactly when. You can always be potentially right in the future. But for China to be linking so closely with the Taliban after our departure, for them to say that, like, hey, watch out, suggests it's just weird. Like,
it is. And to say it publicly, it's a strange thing to do.
It's a very, very strange thing to say. But anyway, we'll tell you what's on our radars up next.